What's going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning back in. Today's video is for two specific audiences. The first being people who want to learn how to use the library SurveyJS with TypeScript and React. And the second being those who have a small business or want to help one of their friends with a small business with helping with something like a COVID survey. So I'm actually going to cover both of these topics in one. I'm going to create a survey, like a basic screening COVID survey that you may have seen at restaurants or at your place of employment. And I'm going to show you just how easy it is to make one. And you can maybe integrate that into your own product's website or a website for a friend who owns a business that needs to screen people. We do live in a crazy world right now, and the safer we all can be, the better off we all will be, and the quicker we can get back to normal. So that being said, I'm going to show you just how easy it is to make one of these surveys, and I hope that you can integrate it and make other people's lives better that way. Okay, guys, let's get into it. So I found a pretty decent COVID screening survey that the city of Toronto uses for its staff screening. And if you take a look here, you'll see that it has a bunch of symptoms in the first question and then a couple yes and no questions afterwards. So I think this is going to be a good example on how to get into the SurveyJS library. And I'm basically going to just turn this into an actual survey. So let's go ahead and we're going to navigate over to the surveyjs.io website. And when you get on the website, we're going to hop on over to the creator. And what this page allows you to do is actually create your own survey. And what it's going to do is it's going to generate the JSON for you that you're going to need inside of your React project. And you're going to use that JSON to populate the survey once you import the library. So getting started, on the right side here, I'm going to go ahead and enter a survey title and then maybe a survey description. You could put whatever you want here, but I'm just going to put, the surveys to check on the potential health risk or spreading COVID or something like that. Now, once we do that, I'm going to drag in a question type by clicking on one of these questions over here and dragging them in. I'm going to pick radio group because I'm going to turn this radio group into a checkmark group. And what that means is that I'm going to have a bunch of answers and it's multiple choice, so you can pick as many as you want. I'm going to make the title of this question here, do you have any of the following new or worsening symptoms? Basically, I'm going to copy it word for word from that questionnaire that I showed you. And I'm going to fast forward through some of this because it's just copying word for word. But once you've entered all your questions, I'm then going to show you some of the settings you have to change and how to input the other questions following this one. Once you're done inputting all these questions, change the radio group here to a checkbox. That way we can use more than one answer. And if you want to test the survey out, you can click this test survey tab up here and you can just start playing around with your survey. So you see if I hit complete here, I checked the is required before, so it won't finish the survey without me checking all the boxes. And then it just shows you some of the survey results at the end. Nothing too crazy here. So again, you can see on the right side, I have is visible and is required. If you have that is required checked, then you're going to need to make sure that the user answers this question. Otherwise, they won't be able to complete the survey. Now that that's done, if you go back to the left side here, you can go ahead and add a Boolean question. And it's basically just a yes or no question. And then you can write out the questions that you had before on the survey. You don't necessarily have to use my survey, the one that I found. You can use any COVID survey you want, anything that fits your needs, but this is just the one I'm going to show you for the video. Now that I've input all my questions and I've made sure that is required is checked in all of them, I've also given them all a unique name. I'm going to go back to my test survey and I'm going to test out the survey one more time. So if I hit complete, I'm going to see that I need to answer all the required questions. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I'm going to hit complete. And you're going to see your survey results again. So next, if you want to go ahead and hit that JSON editor tab, you're going to see the actual JSON that SurveyJS generates and uses in order to figure out how to display the survey to you. So you're going to want to copy and paste this JSON, just throw it into a notepad or something, keep it on the side because you don't want to erase it, first of all, because all that work would go to waste. Make sure you have it ready for when we do the React project. Now that you've copy and pasted it, let's go ahead and get started with React. So for the React project, I made a new directory and I ran the create React app with the Typescript template. So this is the default files and whatnot that it generates for you. So let's go ahead and run an npm install reactstrap and survey-react. These are the two libraries we're going to be using, reactstrap for bootstrap and SurveyReact for SurveyJS. We're going to install the types for reactstrap. You don't have to install the types for SurveyJS. It already comes with it. But that being said, this project's going to be a little bit different than normal because the type definitions they include are very ambiguous. They don't have clear definitions and they kind of suck, to be honest, but we're just going to work around them using the any type. So next thing we're going to do is go to our index.html file, and we're going to be grabbing two CSS files. We're going to grab a bootstrap CSS. I like to use this Flatly theme from Bootswatch, and I'm going to copy the HTML CSS here. And we're also going to go to the SurveyJS website. Make sure that you save that JSON before you leave this page. And I'm going to go ahead and go to step 2, go to my React platform and copy that CSS link. And I'm also going to put that into my index.html inside the header with the bootstrap. Next, I'm going to delete these 5 files from the source folder. And then once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and go into our index file, remove these 2 imports. We don't need them anymore. And then we're going to make a new application.tsx file. Inside of it, at the top, we're going to import React with a capital R from React. We're going to export an interface of iApplication props. It's just going to be empty props for now, but I always like to define them just in case I need them in the future. I'm going to make a const application, and it's going to be of type React.functionComponent. Pass the props into the chevrons. Inside of it, we're just going to be using the navbar for now from reactstrap. So I'm going to make a navbar open variable. I'm going to make its setter function. I'm going to make this equal to a useState. It's going to be of type bool, and the default value is going to be false. If you ever get import errors, just make sure you right-click in Visual Studio Code and just go ahead and auto-import that. Inside of my return function here, I'm going to add a React fragment. Then I'm going to define my navbar. I'm getting this definition straight from the reactstrap documentation, which I will link below. But if you want, instead of copying and pasting, you can just follow along and copy as I'm doing right now. I'm just basically inserting a navbar that's just going to have some text in the top. It's not going to have any fancy links or anything like that. It's just going to have just a slogan, and that's pretty much it. And that's going to go inside of the navbar brand. Now that we've defined our navbar, underneath the navbar, we can go ahead and insert a container from reactstrap as well. And let's just write with some text, the survey will go here. We're going to export default application. And then we're going to import the application in our index file. And once we've done that, we can actually go ahead and test this just to make sure the bootstrap is working properly and everything's showing up the way we want to. So as you can see, the survey website at the top is working properly, the navbar is showing up nice, and the survey text underneath is where it should be. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a folder called components. Inside of it, I'm going to create a survey.tsx file. Inside of that, again, I'm going to import React as I always do. And then I'm going to make the interface for the survey props. Now, for the survey props, unfortunately, I'm going to have to assign the type any to them. And the variables are going to be CSS, JSON, data, and then an onComplete function, which on the inside of it has a survey variable of type any. And that's going to be a void function. we're going to go ahead and create our function component. I'm just going to call it survey component, and it's going to be a React function component with my survey props. On the inside of the function, I'm going to define a const object, and it's going to have my prop variables so I can access them directly by name instead of using the props and a dot. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and return. And now we have to import the SurveyJS library. So how we're going to do that is we're going to import star as survey from SurveyReact. Now how we actually get the survey is we're going to call a survey.survey. That's the actual object. And then I'm going to go ahead and close it off. Now, when we're actually inputting the things we need to pass in, and the things we're going to pass in is some CSS to style it. We're going to pass in the JSON, which is what holds the questions. And we're going to pass in some data, which is going to be some predetermined answers if we want them. You can see here when I type in CSS, nothing shows up. The linting doesn't pick up on any TypeScript definitions, but you also see that there's not going to be any errors. That's because they cheaply define their types with the any prop, or sorry, with the any type, and that's why we're passing in CSS, JSON, and data as any type variables. So you kind of have to follow along with SurveyJS's documentation on how to use their objects. Other than that, though, this is the only way you're going to get it to work with TypeScript properly. So we're going to make our CSS equal to CSS. Same thing with data, JSON, and the onComplete function. Now that we've done that, we can go ahead and export this default survey component. Next, we can go ahead and create a new folder, just call it config. Inside of it, make a survey.ts. And this is going to hold all of our default data, JSON, and CSS for our survey. So I'm going to make a const default survey JSON, and it's going to be an empty object. I'm going to make two more empty objects, one for the CSS, one for the data. And now that I've made these three objects, I'm going to make a default survey config. And inside of it, I'm going to pass in these three objects. And once I've passed in the three objects, I'm going to go ahead and export a default survey config. That way I can access them directly when I import it in another file. You could also import them as the object itself, but I just find this to be cleaner. Now inside of our application, let's go ahead and import our survey. And what we're going to do is we're going to just throw this in a bootstrap card. We're going to do a card body. Go ahead and throw maybe a class name with a margin top being equal to 1 for the card, just to give it some space from the nav bar. And then we're going to import our survey component. You'll notice that we're missing some imports, so it's going to be underlined in red. And what we're going to do is pass in the CSS, JSON, data, and onComplete function from our default survey config. But the onComplete function we're actually going to just define here. For the onComplete function, let's just go ahead and define the function in here. It's going to be survey of type any, and we're going to just pass it to a function. Go ahead and console.log the survey.data. And what the survey.data is the actual results of your survey. So if you actually had this integrated and you wanted to save your results to a database, what you would do is you would save that survey.data. And if you ever wanted to load up somebody's survey, you can load SurveyJS in read-only mode, and you can actually preload it with that data. And I'm going to show you an example later on in this video. I'm just going to comment here too, just for future reference, that right here is where you would be saving to your database or adding to a spreadsheet or whatever you want to do with the survey information. This function is where you would access the answers through that survey.data. So let's go ahead and start this up again and see what happens. The SurveyJS component should load, but it should give us an error that we don't actually have any information. And yeah, so there is no visible page or question in the survey, and that's because we've given it an empty survey JSON. So what we're going to do is you're going to go ahead and copy and paste that survey JSON you made in the survey creator, and we're going to go ahead and import that inside of our default survey config file. Go ahead and replace this empty object with the JSON you just copied, save it, and then go back to your browser, and let's take a look at what the survey looks like now. So as you can see, the survey is now integrated into your web page, and it should be working properly. So let's go ahead and answer and hit complete, and everything seems to be working the way it should. And when you hit complete, it says thank you for the survey. And finally, you can see here this object is getting printed from that onComplete function. And if you look carefully, you'll see that it has the name of each question and then the answer that you provided it. So I'm going to right click and copy this object. And I'm going to show you now, if I put this into that survey default data, it's actually going to load the survey with these answers already pre-written inside of them. So let's go ahead and go back to our survey.ts file and replace that empty object with our answers. I'm going to hit save. And when I go back to the web page, you can see that the answers are actually already loaded in. So right now I can hit complete if I wanted to. Again, that survey data is how you would load this survey again to see somebody's answers from a database. You would want this object, and passing it into the data inside of the survey object is how you do it. Now, lastly, since I'm using Bootstrap everywhere else, but I'm using SurveyJS, you can actually configure SurveyJS to work with Bootstrap and other theming methods. So let's go back to our survey.tsx, and we're going to add a couple things in here. So first, I'm going to add a loading variable. It's going to be a state variable, and it's going to be a bool. And the reason that I do this is when you apply theming, sometimes it doesn't happen right when your page loads. So you want this to load the theming first before you actually render anything. Otherwise, the Bootstrap won't kick in when you load. I'm going to create a use effect here with an empty dependency array, which means that it's going to load right away when I load my page. And I'm going to use a function, and it's going to be called survey.stylesmanager.applyTheme, and inside some quotes, you're going to type in Bootstrap. This signals to SurveyJS that you're using Bootstrap 4.0 or higher. Then I'm going to go ahead and set the loading to false. That way, I can actually check outside of this use effect. If we are loading, I just want you to render a spinner. And once you're done loading, the actual survey will render with the Bootstrap applied. And you can see here that it does look a little bit different now, but you see the background's kind of messed up and the Bootstrap hasn't loaded quite the way I want it to. So what you can actually do now is you can actually pass SurveyJS custom Bootstrap for different parts of the survey. The documentation on the website as far as doing custom CSS for different components of the survey isn't that great, but if you do want to find out what the name of each class is that you have to change, there's a trick way to do it. You can go ahead and type in survey.defaultBootstrapCSS, and then when you hit dot, it's going to render a whole bunch of components that you see here. So each of these corresponds to a different component of SurveyJS. For example, you'll notice checkbox and Boolean. I have both of those questions inside of my survey. So if I was to click bool there and then dot, it would give me each component that renders inside the bool, like the label, the switch, the background of the slider, and then you can apply your custom CSS that way. Or if you know which one of these you're going to use, you can pass it in as a CSS object, and it will automatically apply it to the default Bootstrap CSS. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my SurveyTS function, and I'm going to input some things here in the default survey CSS. I'm going to do a header, a body, and then a complete page. I just want to change the header and the body to have different colors, and I want the complete page to have some padding. So for the header, I'm going to pass in some Bootstrap CSS class names. I'm going to make the background primary, the text white with some padding. I'm going to make the background light for the body, and I'm going to have some padding to the completed page. So as you can see now, the whole background is one color, everything looks nice, and when I hit complete, the thank you for completing the survey has the proper padding. And just like that, guys, you've implemented SurveyJS into React, and it only took you 20 minutes. I think SurveyJS is a very powerful library, and it can be used to do many different things, including things like a COVID screening. It doesn't have to be used for questionnaires like this, but I find that it's very useful if you need to make one fast. And if you really want to help out, a friend's website or a business and they don't have like this kind of form, maybe a COVID survey like this can help them go pretty far. I hope you can take what I've learned today and use it to help benefit the world. And hopefully we can make this a better place. Thank you so much for tuning back in, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.